From the PEP Radio Newsroom, this is the morning news for October 14th, 2025. These are the stories we are covering at this hour. Hundreds of federal employees working on mental health services, disease outbreaks, and disaster preparedness were among those hit by the Trump administration's mass firings over the weekend. Current and laid-off workers said Monday, as the administration aimed to pressure Democratic lawmakers to give in and end the nearly 2-week-long government shutdown. The government-wide reduction in force initiative that began Friday roiled the massive U.S. Department of Health and Human Services just 6 months after it went through an earlier round of cuts, thanks to DOGE, and as many staffers already were disconnected from work because of the shutdown. The situation turned even more chaotic over the weekend when more than half of the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention employees who'd gotten layoff notices learned they received them in error and were still employed with the agency. HHS, through its agencies, is responsible for tracking health trends and disease outbreaks, conducting and funding medical research, and monitoring the safety of food and medicine, as well as for administering health insurance programs for nearly half the country. Among the HHS agencies facing staffing cuts were the CDC, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, and the Administration for Strategic Preparedness and Response, or ASPR, according to current and laid-off employees who spoke with the Associated Press. Meanwhile, over in the House of Representatives, Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson predicted Monday that the federal government shutdown may become the longest in history, saying he won't negotiate with Democrats until they hit pause on their health care demands and reopen. Standing alone at the Capitol on the 13th day of the shutdown, the Speaker said he was unaware of the details of the thousands of federal workers being fired by the Trump administration. It's a highly unusual mass layoff, widely seen as a way to seize on the shutdown to reduce the scope of government. Vice President J.D. Vance has warned of painful cuts ahead, even as employee unions sue. We're barreling toward one of the longest shutdowns in American history, Johnson of Louisiana said. With no endgame in sight, the shutdown is expected to roll on for the unforeseeable future. The closure has halted routine government operations, shuttered Smithsonian museums and other landmark cultural institutions, and left airports scrambling with flight disruptions, all injecting more uncertainty into an already precarious economy. The House is out of legislative session, with Johnson refusing to call lawmakers back to Washington, while the Senate, closed Monday for the federal holiday, will return to work Tuesday. But senators are stuck in a cul-de-sac of failed votes as Democrats refuse to relent on their health care demands. At its core, the shutdown is a debate over health care policy, particularly the Affordable Care Act subsidies that are expiring for millions of Americans who rely on government aid to purchase their own health insurance policies on the Obamacare exchanges, or Affordable Care Act exchanges. Democrats demand the subsidies be extended, but Republicans argue the issue can be dealt with later. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries said with Republicans having essentially shut down the chamber now for a fourth week, no real negotiations are underway. They're nowhere to be found, he said on MSNBC, and with Congress and the White House stalemated, some are eyeing the end of the month as the next potential deadline to reopen the government. Turning to Pennsylvania news. Talk about shutdowns and budget stalemates. Well, Pennsylvania is the only state in the nation that doesn't have a fiscal year budget for the year ahead. Pennsylvania has the largest full-time state legislature in the entire country, with 253 well-compensated state representatives and senators. Yet, it has been unable to fulfill one of its primary missions, passing a state budget. The budget impasse in Pennsylvania between the Democrats and Republicans is now in its 105th day with no end in sight. Is it time to shrink the size of the legislature. Well, Pennsylvania's state capitol boasts a magnificent chamber of chandeliered ceilings and marble walls, topped by murals depicting Pennsylvania's rich history, the home away from home for 203 state representatives from all four corners of the Commonwealth. I'm amazed they remembered that Erie is part of the Commonwealth. Normally we think of that as part of, Ohio, New York, or Canada, but I digress. To run the splendid chamber and the 50-member state Senate down the hall, it costs the taxpayers more than $400 million a year. And that means each lawmaker gets a base salary of $110,000, a budget to hire staff for an office in Harrisburg and another in their district, a $200 plus per diem, a generous pension, and health care for life, all coming at an estimated $1 million every year. Despite all that cash, Pennsylvania has historically had one of the least productive legislatures in the country, currently embroiled in a budget battle that just drags on and on and on. Why do you need all these people? Well, KDKA's Andy Sheehan asked Pennsylvania Senator Lisa Boscola from the 18th Pennsylvania District. You don't. Her comment, you don't. I've been saying it for years and years, Senator Boscola said. Consider that California has 40 million people compared to Pennsylvania's 13 million, but with 80 state representatives and 40 senators, its legislature is less than half the size of Pennsylvania's. Calling the state's current body expensive, bloated, and gridlocked, Senator Boscola is proposing a bill to essentially cut the legislature in half. And that's the news at this hour. If you're watching our news videos on YouTube, please be sure to subscribe to our channel. PEP Radio is available on the Live 365 app, the PEP Radio page at paequality.com, Roku, and Alexa. Up next, we have the Meadville area weather forecast here on PEP Radio.